bill on the table. Song Nansure mentally prepared himself and grabbed the bill. Nan. 2,500,000 spirit stones. 2.5 million spirit stones. Song Nansure was stunned on the spot. She felt that each of these numbers was a blatant mockery of her. She asked tremblingly, "Are you sure this bill doesn't have an extra 10,000? The Demon King looked at her with pity. "I'm sure." Song Nansure wished he could faint on the spot again. Upon seeing this, the Demon Emperor realized it was not a place to linger and immediately made his escape. Before making his escape, he paused and added, "Also, you young people, since you're all injured, you'd better be more restrained." Neither of them paid him any attention. Seeing their rudeness, the Demon Emperor, feeling no remorse whatsoever, decided not to tell them that the Immortal Alliance and the Demon Clan had decided to help them build the Myriad Manifestations Tower. After all, it collapsed to prevent the evil spirits inside the pagoda of all things from coming out. They weren't demons. But now, let them see what the wickedness of the human heart is first, so they won't get arrogant after becoming gods. At this moment, Song Nansure was not arrogant at all. She even asked the heavens, "If I were to give up this godhood, could you exchange it for 2.5 million spirit stones?" The way of heaven has maintained a high level of silence. Seeing that she was too upset, Yoon Jifeng comforted her. "Nansure, it's only 2.5 million spirit stones. We'll figure out another way." Song Nansure immediately looked at him. She suddenly asked, "What did I just say?" Yoon Jifeng looked bewildered. "Spirit stones?" Song Nansure, "No, it's the one you proposed to." Yoon Jifeng immediately perked up and said, "You said that as long as I get past Senior Master." Song Nansure clapped his hands. "Yes. That's it." She grabbed the other person's hand and said earnestly, "How about we switch? I'll take care of old Nansure, and you take care of these 2.5 million spirit stones." Yoon Jifeng. His path to marriage suddenly became much more difficult. Great. Meanwhile, outside, the crowd, unable to see Song Nansure and the others, were discussing their ascension to godhood with great enthusiasm. Among them, the cultivators of the Immortal Alliance were the most enthusiastic. Why? Because there are cultivators in the Immortal Alliance who possess the ability to foresee the future. Long before Song Nansure became a god, they had already begun to worship her. He was the disciple of an elder of the Immortal Alliance. At this moment, in front of his fellow disciples, the disciple spoke with great enthusiasm and pride. "Back in the Hohuan sect, my master and I could tell at a glance that this fairy song was no ordinary person. And it turns out that my master and I were indeed insightful. Back then, when I worshipped the gods, you all laughed at me for worshipping fairy song. Now do you see? She's truly a god." Some nodded in agreement, while others couldn't help but grumble, "It's just a god. Everyone cultivates to ascend to godhood. If I ascended, I'd be a god too. And you're worshipping a god." Some people couldn't stand it and couldn't help but sneer. He said, "Ascension is ascension, but do you think everyone who ascends will get a divine position? In the celestial realm, divine positions are extremely limited, and many people who ascend become fairy maidens or guards for the powerful beings above. Fairy Song and the others reserved 2 divine positions even before they ascended. You should make sure you can ascend first." The man was so angry that he stormed off on the spot. The crowd then turned to him and said, "Ignore him. By the way, since you've been worshipping Fairy Song so early, why don't you let us see how you perform the ritual? That way, we can prepare accordingly when we get back." Upon hearing this, the apprentice happily agreed. Then a group of people went to the apprentice's room. On the way, someone said, "I only know that Lord Yunxian is a demon god, but I don't know what kind of god Lady Song is." At that moment, the apprentice pushed open the door. Then, everyone saw a golden statue of the god of wealth with Song Nanshi's face. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Then someone exclaimed in sudden realization, "So that's it. So Fairy Song's divine position is that of the god of wealth." The apprentice thought it was a bit strange at first, but after thinking about it carefully, he realized it was quite normal. "Isn't Fairy Song the god of wealth?" He nodded firmly and said decisively, "That's right. That's exactly it." Everyone, "Oh, I understand now." As a result, the entire cultivation world was abuzz with news of Song Nanshi's divine position that very day. For example, she is the god of wealth. For example, her methods of attracting wealth for others are quite unusual. Do you know why she, a goddess of wealth, is so poor? It's because she is born to bring good fortune to others. She uses her own wealth to bring wealth to others, and the poorer she is, the richer the person she seeks wealth from becomes. Although everyone felt that this was somewhat unfair, they still closed their doors and came to worship the god of wealth that night. So, when Song Nanshi's injuries had healed a bit and she had time to go down the mountain, she saw that everyone who saw her stared at her eagerly. Some people couldn't help but ask, "Fairy Song, are you poor?" Upon recalling the spirit stone that had knocked her unconscious, Song Nanshi immediately exclaimed, "Poor. Extremely poor." The person exclaimed, "That's great. Song Nanshi, why do I owe you something? Why are you so happy that I'm poor?" Until Yu Jiujio came looking for her. The junior sister asked in a flurry, "Senior sister, are you really a god of wealth who makes others richer the poorer you are?" Song Nanshi, "I understand. Extra R." With her head covered in bandages, Song Nanshi began running around trying to dispel the rumors, but the attempt seemed to be less than successful. The more she tried to refute them, the more convinced people became that Song Nanshi must have some unknown identity as a god of wealth. After all, this information came from within the Immortal Alliance. It's authoritative. Thus, the entire cultivation world gradually came to accept that Song Nanshi's divine position was that of a selfless god of wealth. Later, Zhu Xiu felt she had had enough of her carefree life and wanted to return to the village, to the sect to settle down and live a few peaceful days, so she restarted her crematorium business. The crematorium manager was overjoyed and immediately bought a statue of the god of wealth to enshrine, hoping it would bring him and the deceased's family abundant wealth. Then, as soon as Zhu Xiu stepped into the crematorium, she saw the god of wealth statue that had the same face as her junior sister. She fell silent on the spot. The steward wanted to offer incense and tributes, but Zhu Xiu stopped him without expression. Then she turned around, took the items, and found Song Nanshi. To Song Nanshi's utter bewilderment, she respectfully placed the tributes in front of her and lit 3 incense sticks on the spot. Song Nanshi, that's absolutely outrageous. Only then did she realize how outrageous the rumors had become. She thought about her own mouth, and then about all the mouths in the world, and just lay down on the spot, resigning herself to her fate. Of course, that's all in the future. Song Nanshi isn't at the point of giving up yet. She feels she can still be saved. Most importantly, because she possessed a divine status, she could vaguely sense that there were indeed legitimate gods of wealth in the celestial realm. This was quite awkward. Song Nanshi was a little afraid to think about how he would handle this colleague relationship after he was promoted in the future. Below the immortal realm are 3,000 minor worlds, and the minor world where Song Nanshe is located is one of them. In the immortal realm, non-combat deities such as the god of wealth and the kitchen god mainly rely on the offerings from other people in the lower realms for their power. Once Song Nanshe spread this rumor, he directly cut off the offerings of a minor world, which is no different from cutting off someone's source of income. After all, he was the god of wealth. Considering his own fate of constantly losing money, Song Nanshe still wanted to maintain good relationships with people. Moreover, she felt that even after ascending to heaven, her seniority among the gods would still be the lowest, so it was better to keep a low profile to avoid being ostracized in the future. Song Nanshe cautiously felt that he was still too inexperienced to offend a god of wealth. Meanwhile, in the immortal realm, the god of wealth himself was racking his brains trying to figure out where he had offended this enforcement god who hadn't even ascended to office yet but had already caused the birth of 2 stars. He spent the entire night thinking about it, even recalling how he stole someone else's chicken before his ascension, but he still couldn't figure out where he had offended the future god of law enforcement. So, as soon as it was light, he rushed to the residence of Senior Sure, who was in charge of the astrolabe, and started banging on the door. Before his ascension, Senior Stone was poor, and even after his ascension, his fortune was still not good. He was quite flattered that the god of wealth had come to his door, so he quickly opened the door to welcome him. Then the god of wealth said, "I heard that you have some connection with our newly born god of law enforcement. Do you know what the god of law enforcement dislikes about me?" Senior Sure was stunned on the spot and couldn't help but say, "With her terrible luck, she dares to look down on you." The god of wealth squatted on the ground, scratching his head, and said, "If the god of law enforcement doesn't dislike me, why are so many of the incense offerings I've received these past few days addressed to him? The god of law enforcement shouldn't concern himself with fortune, right?" He paused, then suddenly exclaimed in horror, "It's over. Could she be after my divine position?" After saying that, he shook his head again, denying it shouldn't be. Combat-type deities like you don't need incense to maintain your power, unlike us. We can't even maintain our power without incense. Besides, the goddess of law enforcement is a deity appointed by heaven to be born as one of the twin stars. How could she possibly look down on my insignificant position? He convinced himself. However, to everyone's surprise, Senior Sure suddenly said, "That's not impossible." The god of wealth looked over, completely bewildered. Then Senior Sure said with envy, "I think if she could get your position, she would be willing to exchange the positions of the 3 enforcement gods." God of wealth. He's gone from that pew. What a wonderful divine position he was. One where he didn't have to worry about the will of heaven or gather believers, and where he held the power of life and death. Why give him up to be a god of wealth? Does the brain have a disease? The god of wealth chuckled dryly. "Please don't joke with me. The god of law enforcement is not someone I can afford to offend." Senior Sure hit the nail on the head. "Believe it or not, she's definitely thinking about how to curry favor with you, her god of wealth." God of wealth. I'd heard long ago that fortune tellers were all a bit mentally unstable, and now it seems their reputation is well deserved. Senior Sure even rubbed his hands together, eager to try, and said, "How about I think of a way to see if the 2 of you can switch divine positions?" The god of wealth now feels that Senior Stone is completely unreliable. With external aid proving unreliable, and for the sake of his future and life after the god of law enforcement's ascension, the god of wealth decides to take the initiative. He said, "I remember that the god of law enforcement and the demon god are a couple, right? Are they going to get married in the mortal realm? If gods get married in the mortal realm, the heavenly dove should send down a bluebird to bestow a marriage certificate. Do you think I could take this opportunity to have the bluebird deliver my wedding gifts to them, so I can show my face in advance and build a good relationship with them? Senior Sher's intelligence kicked in for a moment, and he nodded, saying, "It's feasible." The god of wealth felt he had seen hope. When will they get married? Senior Sher said practically, "Of course, we should wait until they've saved up enough money for the wedding." God of wealth. He ignored that question and continued, "What should I give them as a gift when they get married?" Senior Sher stated truthfully, "Spirit stones, a large quantity of spirit stones." God of wealth. Oh no, it's happening again. A god of law enforcement and a demon god are getting married, and I, a mere god of wealth, send spirit stones to humiliate them. Am I afraid that living too long won't be exciting enough? The god of wealth decided to rely on himself and left with a weary expression. Senior Sher was quite dissatisfied. He said, "I'm absolutely telling the truth." But the god of wealth had already gone far away, and passers-by, upon hearing this, couldn't help but ask, "What, really?" The senior master casually remarked, "It's about sending congratulatory gifts for our enforcement god's wedding." Upon hearing this, the man was first taken aback, then suddenly realized what was going on. Unbelievable, there's such a thing? This is a great way to build a good relationship with the god of law enforcement. The man immediately went home and told his relatives and friends about the method. Friends and relatives were in a dilemma. Even if she is a god of law enforcement, do we really need to fawn over her like this? The celestial realm doesn't need another god of war. This person was exasperated. We don't need another one, but these days, everyone's godhood is earned through hard work and struggle. Even that guy in the north, the second-generation immortal, didn't his parents have to pull strings for a long time to get a godhood? And them? They were born as twin stars before they even ascended, and they've already secured 2 new godhoods. Not to mention, one of them is a demon god. Demons and gods. They had only heard of them in legends. After a moment's hesitation, the relatives and friends gritted their teeth and made the final decision: send it. Then the two discussed what to give as a gift. Like the god of wealth, they all agreed that directly giving money would be an insult to the gods of law enforcement. Someone as capable as him, how could he possibly lack money? It has to be heartfelt. It also needs to be original. The two exchanged a glance, both thinking they were incredibly clever. They immediately tinkered with a bunch of things that were both innovative and thoughtful, but ultimately useless. Everything was ready. All that was missing was for Song Nansher and his wife to get married. But Song Nansher had no thoughts about marriage at all. She had even forgotten her promise to Yoon Jifeng that she would get married once she had won over Master Sher. All she could think about now was spirit stones. After her head injury healed, she took stock of the damage to the pagoda of all things and came to a conclusion. The bill that the Demon Emperor sent was absolutely true, not a lie. She began to clean up the mess, busy trying to separate the Vientiane Tower and the Water Mirror Moon, while also pondering whether she could restart her graduate entrance exam study room plan. For example, selling trial slots for the Tower of All Things. During this time, they also had to be wary of the remnant souls of the Tower of All Things who might suddenly try to escape. Because of the balance of the heavenly way, as long as there is evil in the world, these evil spirits cannot be eliminated. Yoon Jifeng can absorb demonic energy and become the embodiment of demon in the human world, but she cannot find a second person who can become the embodiment of evil in the world. Therefore, this pagoda of all things still needs to be repaired and protected. The only good news is that the Immortal Alliance and the Demon Clan probably don't believe she can build the Myriad Manifestations Tower in her lifetime, so both sides have decided to help by contributing money. The bad news is that these two old foxes are both incredibly stingy. Song Nansher was forced to start arguing. While Song Nansher was preoccupied with his career and started arguing, Yoon Ji-fan remained true to his original aspirations and decided to find a way to make money while also winning over Song Nansher's only elder. Upon hearing this, Ju Shio asked sharply, the only elder, "Your master?" Yoon Ji-fan was stunned. "Huh? Isn't it senior master?" Ju Shio pondered for a moment and then said, "Yes, that person isn't really an elder. You just need to handle senior sure." Yoon Ji-fan couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He immediately made up his mind to meet his senior mentor. Just after he left, In Buguo, who arrived late, appeared at the door. It was unclear how long he had been listening or what he had heard. Ju Shio smiled at him, her smile showing neither hatred nor concern. At this moment, Yoon Ji-fan had already rushed to Master Shi's residence in one go. Old Master Shi was sitting on the doorstep basking in the sun when Yoon Ji-fan rushed over and said, "Senior, I've been thinking. As witty and ruthless as he is, he couldn't come up with what he was thinking for a long time." The old man was startled by his sudden appearance, and then rolled his eyes when he heard him stammering. He tossed the sunflower seeds aside and asked directly, "Speak your mind. What are you thinking?" Yoon Ji-fan took a deep breath and said, "I want to share both glory and shame with Nansher. We'll advance and retreat as one." He felt his answer was perfect, but the old man said expressionlessly, "Speak like a human being." Yoon Ji-fan. In a moment of impulsiveness, he blurted out, "I want to pay off the debt with Nansher." The old master was speechless. He felt he couldn't bring himself to refuse, because listening to this, the kid's sacrifice was truly enormous. "She's willing to pay off 2.5 million with him. What kind of spirit is that? This is true love." He couldn't help but ask, "Have you made up your mind?" Yoon Ji-fan said resolutely, "It's decided." "Old Master Shi, that's Song Nansher." Yoon Ji-fan, she agreed too. Old Master Shi couldn't help but think to himself, "Yes, it's to pay off debts. How could that girl possibly refuse?" Thinking about it this way, the kid is even more pitiful, like he was tricked into marriage. His voice softened slightly as he asked gently, "So when do you want to get married?" Yoon Ji-fan glanced at him, and seeing that his expression was all right, he couldn't help but want to push his luck. He paused, then tentatively asked, "Then, next month?" Then the old man's expression changed. The old man, who had just thought Song Nansher was deceiving him into marriage, grabbed the iron sword beside him and started smashing it at Yoon Ji-fan, roaring, "Next month? What can you possibly prepare by next month? You think you can deceive our Nansher into marriage just because you have some kind of demon god identity? I don't agree to this marriage." Yoon Ji-fan dared not dodge or fight back, and simply endured it. Unfortunately, he is currently in the process of transforming spiritual energy into demonic energy. Sometimes, the counterattacks of demonic energy are beyond his control. In order not to hurt Master Shi, he silently removes his protective barrier and takes the beating. The old man beat him up to vent his anger, and then scolded him harshly, "I'm not some feudal patriarch. If you want to get married, you absolutely can't do it so early. She's young and doesn't know any better, but don't you know any better either?" Yoon Ji-fan was taken aback. Seeing his reaction, the old master reminded him, her divine status. Upon hearing this, Yoon Ji-fan's mind, which had been clouded by joy, gradually calmed down. Yes, her divinity. Her divine status is not yet fully formed. If they were to cultivate together after marriage, his demon god status would inevitably affect her divine status. Dual cultivation with someone of higher cultivation level can indeed help form a divine status, but Song Nansure is a law enforcement god, and it may not be a good thing for her divine status to be influenced by others. He could choose not to touch her after marriage, but living together day and night, Yoon Ji-fan didn't believe in his own self-control. His feverish mind gradually calmed down, and he broke free from the memory of Song Nan's absence. Yoon Ji-fan took a deep breath. He thought that he had waited for more than 100 years, so now he was just waiting a little longer. He has plenty of time to wait. He can spend the rest of his life waiting for her. His expression calmed down, and he said sincerely, "Thank you for your guidance, senior." Old Master Shi's expression softened a little. Then, Yoon Ji-fan returned with a bruised and swollen face and a limp. Upon seeing his injury, Song Nanshure's anger flared immediately. He rolled up his sleeves and said, "Who hurt you? I'll avenge you." Yoon Ji-fan, senior master. Song Nansure. She sheepishly lowered her sleeves again, offering a half-hearted consolation. "He's an elder, we should be polite." Yoon Ji-fan. I have a feeling that his status has been declining day by day since he got together with Song Nansure. Song Nansure also asked him, "Why did old Master Shi hit you? Tell me so I can be happy now. Let me have some advice." Yoon Ji-fan glanced at her and said, "I have proposed marriage to senior master." Song Nansure couldn't help but look over. She asked eagerly, "He didn't agree? Do you want me to help you persuade him?" Yoon Ji-fan reached out and touched her hair. He said softly, "I'm not in a hurry, we have plenty of time." Song Nansure couldn't help but touch his face. "You were in such a hurry yesterday, and now." She began to doubt her own charm. But when Yoon Ji-fan said he wasn't in a hurry, he really wasn't in a hurry at all. In the first year, the two of them were stationed together in the demon realm, and he didn't mention marriage at all. The following year, after they finished their disputes with the demon race and the Immortal Alliance, the amount of money Song Nansure needed to pay was greatly reduced. In the 5th year, senior sister Ju Shio opened her 7th crematorium. The original plot unfolded, and it was discovered that Master's white moonlight was not dead. Master went to save her as in the original story, but after saving her, he confessed what he had done over the years, and the white moonlight slapped him. In the 7th year, Ju Shio opened her 10th crematorium. Bai Yueguang felt that she was having bad luck around her, so she went to her senior sister's crematorium to apply for a job. In the 10th year, the junior sister finally accepted the demon prince's human form, and the sweet romance novel began to see a glimmer of hope. In the 15th year, her junior sister suddenly ran over, looking troubled, and asked her, "Humans and demons are different, are they not suitable to be together?" Song Nansure glanced at the sky casually, then said, "I observed the celestial phenomena last night, and you two are definitely a match made in heaven." The junior sister laughed happily. In the 20th year, Song Nansure finally finished repairing his Wanxiang pagoda, and had accumulated a long list of expense reports. Then one day, Yoon Ji-fan suddenly said, "Nansure, how about we get married?" Song Nansure, "Great." So the two suddenly announced their decision to get married. The cultivation world was shaken. The celestial realm, which had been waiting for so long, was also shaken. Over the years, many people have been waiting for them to get married and send gifts to try and get closer to them. They have prepared gifts wave after wave, but they have been waiting for so many years. Yu Sheng couldn't help but complain. They really have a lot of patience. And now, that day has finally come. The bluebird, sent by the heavenly Tao to deliver the marriage certificate to the two righteous gods, arrived late. Before it could descend to the mortal realm, it was immediately pinned to the ground by the gods. Bluebird, please take this with you. Bluebird, this is my wedding gift. And so, in the very end, the ethereal and agile bluebird, adorned with a colorful but ultimately useless wedding gift and carrying the marriage certificate in its beak, took flight. Then it didn't fly. Bang! It crashed to the ground. Gods! Someone couldn't help but angrily say, it's true that a small gift carries great meaning. But who sent this Taihu stone over there? Extra free. After Song Nansure announced his intention to get married, the entire cultivation world was abuzz with attention. When Song Nansure was spotted, he disguised himself and went to Wangxiang Tower to buy things. He didn't hear another topic along the way. When she returned, she couldn't help but click her tongue in amazement. She originally thought that since Yung Jifeng's clansmen were now scattered all over the world, and she herself had very few close friends, and their circles largely overlapped, it would be better to simply invite a few people to witness the wedding, which would save a lot of trouble. Most importantly, it saved money. She shared her thoughts with Yung Jifeng. She said with great interest, anyway, over the years, the two places we've visited most often are Wuyang Sect and Wangxiang Pagoda. We can just invite them to Wangxiang Pagoda for a gathering. Over the years, Song Nansure and Yung Jifeng have never been apart. Because they have been repairing the Wangxiang Pagoda, they spend more time there. In the end, they built the 9th floor and moved in themselves, only occasionally returning to the Wuyang Sect to visit. The Wangxiang Pagoda has been under construction for so many years and cost so much money. Song Nansure has even developed an attachment to it. She thought getting married at the Tower of All Things wouldn't be bad. She could even coerce or entice the demons in the tower to act as a mood maker or something. The Wuyang Sect is actually not bad either. A few years ago, Yung Jifeng became a guest elder of the Wuyang Sect at the invitation of the sect leader. In Bugua, whose relationship with Song Nansure was not good, directly gave her a master's degree. The sect leader then allocated them a mountain peak in a decent location to live on. They used up all their money building the Wangxiang Pagoda, so they didn't have any money left to build the mountain. That mountain is still barren to this day. Song Nansure is thinking that if it can't be built in a few more years, he'll just use it to grow vegetables. From planning where to hold the wedding to figuring out what vegetables to plant on the mountain, she looked up and saw Yung Jifeng looking hesitant and unsure of what to say. Song Nansure paused. What? Yung Jifeng said with a complicated expression, this is the only time I'll get married in my life, and I actually want it to be a bit more grand. Song Nansure. For some reason, she seemed to have become the scumbag who had gotten his hands on his boyfriend but wasn't planning on giving him a wedding. She hesitated for a moment, then Before he could finish speaking, the doors of the Vientiane Tower were pounded on. When Song Nansure ran over, she saw Jiangji grinning foolishly at the door, and when he saw Song Nansure come down, he waved to her in a silly manner. Song Nansure. In recent years, although they haven't returned to Wuyang Sect often, Jiangji and the others have been as if they were afraid that the Wuyang Sect members would starve to death there. They would come every 10 days or half a month to check if the members were still alive and well, stay for a few days, and then return home satisfied after seeing that the members were all alive and well. Once or twice, Song Nansure was moved by the camaraderie between them. 10 times, 20 times. She deeply realized how true the saying distance makes the heart grow fonder is. Song Nansure opened the door with a dark face, Didn't you say you might be about to break through and were planning to go into seclusion for a few years? Jiangji replied sincerely, Oh, it was the sect leader who dragged me out to find you after he heard you were getting married. Song Nansher. She began to sense something was wrong and cautiously said, Sect leader. Jiangji calmly said, These past few days, a lot of people have gathered at the Wuyang sect, all wanting to attend your wedding. There are so many people that they're almost blocking the Wuyang sect's main gate. The sect leader wants you to come back quickly, hold a wedding, and then let them leave. Song Nansher's vision went black, and he couldn't help but say, How could I possibly know so many people? She couldn't help but turn to look at Yung Jifeng. You know him. The clouds ceased their lingering thoughts. After a moment, he gasped, Are they here to freeload? Song Nansher. That makes a lot of sense. But regardless of whether it makes sense or not, their wedding caused quite a stir, so keeping everything simple is out of the question. She could simplify everything, but I'm afraid the cultivation world would say that the Boundless sect was going bankrupt someday. She packed her things and returned to Wuyang sect in a dejected manner. Behind him, Yung Jifeng wore a smile that he couldn't hide. On the first day of their return, Master Sure personally cast a divination to set an auspicious date for them a month later, and then announced to the entire cultivation world that Song Nansher and Yung Jifeng were to get married. This was considered an official signal, and the various sects and families that had been holding back and observing immediately mobilized, sending their senior members of sufficient stature one by one to rush to the Boundless sect. The commotion was comparable to the Immortal Cultivation Conference 20 years ago. Having been obsessed with building towers and exploiting the Immortal Alliance for years, Song Nansher realized for the first time just how much influence a god's every move could have. She also understood why the sect leader insisted that Jiangji bring her back. They simply cannot remain low-key, no matter what. On the third day after her return, Zhu Xiu, who was engrossed in opening branches all over the cultivation world, rushed back, bringing back her junior sister, who had come from the demon race. The prince transformed into a rabbit again, perched quietly on his junior sister's shoulder like a chicken. It is said that he offended his junior sister, and in order to avoid a beating, he reluctantly abandoned his human form and went into his original form to seek refuge. Yung Jifeng has been busy ever since he returned to the Wuyang sect. The sect leader initially offered to handle all their wedding arrangements, but he declined, preferring to take care of all the tedious tasks himself. This meant that several sword cultivators who had finally managed to find Yung Jifeng's whereabouts and wanted to seek his guidance were always caught off guard. Yung Jifeng left behind only one sentence. Busy getting married. Then, very quickly, it was the day before the wedding. That night, Yung Jifeng, who had been busy for a whole month, suddenly appeared under her window. Just as on the day they realized their feelings for each other, he went to her window and knocked. He said, Southern time. Song Nansher, Yung Jifeng, we're finally getting married. Song Nansher knew that his finally was not the finally he had been waiting for 20 years. Rather, it was the finally from my memory of my past life. Song Nansher, who hadn't felt anything before, suddenly felt the tension before his wedding. She said softly, Okay. On the morning of her wedding, Song Nansher was pulled out of bed by Yu Xiu and Yu Jiujiu, who quickly dressed her up. Jiangji watched as Yung Jifeng walked step by step up the long steps of the Wuyang sect, towards Song Nansher, who was as bright as a red cloud in the sky. According to etiquette, he should have welcomed Song Nansher onto the flying boat and then mounted the heavenly horse himself. But the two of them ignored this rule. Yung Jifeng extended his hand to Song Nansher. Song Nansher grabbed him. Just like they had walked this far, the two held hands tightly and walked side by side down the long steps toward the Wuyang sex altar. Everyone was slightly taken aback. Seeing that Jiangji and the others, who were closest to the bride and groom, had no objections, they wisely kept quiet. People thronged the altar, yet remained completely silent. They watched as the two walked step by step toward the altar. A marriage certificate lay on the altar. Just as Yoon Ji-feng was about to pick it up, a clear bird song rang out from the sky. Both of them were startled and looked up. Then a huge rock appeared out of nowhere in the sky. Song Nansher blurted out, "Meteorite." Then she realized something was wrong, because the stone was flying too steadily. She looked closely and saw a large, slender bird flapping its wings in vain on the boulder, trying to pull up the stone hanging around its neck. Its wings were practically shooting sparks. However, it was no use. The boulder suddenly plummeted downwards, and the large bird's neck twisted strangely, its clear chirping turning into a hoarse jee. Then it crashed headfirst into the altar where they were. Bang! The large bird, disoriented, crashed in front of them. Yoon Ji-feng was shocked and immediately drew his long sword, coldly saying, "Enemy attack." The crowd below the altar was also shocked and drew their weapons, looking nervously at the large bird. Only Song Nansher felt something was wrong. She looked at the large bird falling from the sky with a puzzled expression. Then, unable to contain himself, he said, "That thing hanging around its neck, isn't that a Taihu stone? Could it be that it's planning to use the Taihu stone to crush us all to death? That's incredibly malicious." Yoon Ji-feng said nothing, but stepped forward with a cold face, and was about to kill the big bird on the spot. Just then, the large bird seemed to sense the danger and immediately spoke. It quickly said, "My lord, please wait. The bluebird has come to congratulate you on your wedding." Yoon Ji-feng paused, then said coldly, "You've come to congratulate me?" The bluebird struggled twice to get rid of the Taihu stone hanging from its neck, then twisted its neck twice to straighten its strangely angled neck. Then it shook its whole body, and all the messy things hanging on its body fell off with a clatter. Song Nansher stared in disbelief, as did everyone else. Upon seeing this, the bluebird spoke. Its clear voice said, "I am the azure bird of the celestial realm. I have been instructed by the heavenly Tao to deliver the marriage certificate to the two righteous gods and congratulate them on their happy marriage." As soon as he finished speaking, a marriage certificate appeared out of thin air and slowly landed on the altar, replacing the marriage certificate originally prepared by the boundless sect. Yoon Ji-feng and Song Nansher exchanged a glance. Yoon Ji-feng's expression softened. He nodded to Qingyu and said, "Please thank heaven for me." The bluebird breathed a sigh of relief and respectfully agreed. Then Song Nansher spoke. She asked, somewhat confused, "And all these things you brought? Heaven can't just send her a Taihu stone, can it?" The bluebird quickly replied, "This is a wedding gift from the gods of the celestial realm to the two righteous gods." Song Nansher. Putting everything else aside, the person who gave the Taihu stone was quite thoughtful. She asked hesitantly, "Should we prepare some return gifts for you to take up with you?" Upon hearing this, the bluebird's bird face immediately displayed an extremely human-like fear. Its voice even changed tone as it hurriedly said, "My lord. No need. The gods only wish to congratulate you on your marriage. They don't want any return gifts." Song Nansher thought to himself, "The gods in this celestial realm are all quite polite." She said somewhat shyly, "Then please thank the gods for me." The bluebird quickly replied, "This is what the bluebird should do." Then, as if it couldn't stay a moment longer, it hurriedly took off as if fleeing for its life. Its wings flapped rapidly. Looking at it, Song Nansure couldn't help but sigh. The bluebird seems very busy. I was planning to leave it to bring some wine to the gods, as the way of inviting them to our wedding. Looking at the mass of gifts on the ground, and then at the title stone, Yoon Ji-feng suddenly felt a pang of sympathy for Qingyu. Being a messenger in the celestial realm must be no easy task. The master of ceremonies was still standing there blankly. The old master checked the time and realized that if they continued to ramble on like this, they would really miss the auspicious time. He kicked the master of ceremonies directly. The master of ceremonies, regaining his composure, quickly said, "The auspicious hour has arrived. Heaven and earth bear witness. May you be forever united in heart and soul. May your vows be made." Song Nansure and Yoon Ji-feng exchanged a glance, then stepped forward together and wrote their names on the marriage certificate bestowed by heaven. The marriage certificate suddenly lit up with a golden light, and the next moment, the entire certificate turned into golden dust, which slowly floated into the sky. Everyone stared in disbelief at the scene. In the celestial realm, the old man under the moon, who presides over marriage, saw this golden light and smiled as he took out a red thread. The room, decorated with red lines, was filled with wooden plaques inscribed with cinnabar, each bearing a name. The names are connected by a red line. Among these wooden signs, only 2 had names in black and no red lines. The clouds ceased their movement during the Southern Song dynasty. One was destined to be a lone star, the other should never have existed in this world. Now that they have met, they are a perfect match. It finally came to a satisfactory conclusion. A thin red thread was tied at one end to Yoon Ji-feng's wooden plaque and at the other end to Song Nansure. The old man under the moon almost sighed. Finally, it's a perfect ending. After Song Nansure and Yoon Ji-feng drank a couple of cups of wine with the wedding guests, they were urged to return to their bridal chamber. After drinking the nuptial wine, the 2 sat blankly on the bed. Song Nansure couldn't help but look at Yoon Ji-feng. She saw Yoon Ji-feng staring blankly at her, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. Song Nansure's heart stirred. To be honest, over the past 20 years, they have had more intimate contact than kissing. There were even a few near misses where the gun nearly went off. But Yoon Ji-feng always stopped abruptly, which could be considered as acting within the bounds of propriety. Song Nansure is not the kind of woman who thinks intimate contact must be after marriage. In fact, she is not opposed to it. So she began to doubt her own charm, wondering if Yoon Ji-feng was already experiencing the 7-year itch. But Yoon Ji-feng's emotions stirred during each of their intimate moments. She felt that Yoon Ji-feng felt the same thing. But why didn't he continue? As time went on, Song Nansure gradually began to have some guesses. Perhaps it's because of her divine status. Just as she had expected, Yoon Ji-feng proposed marriage only after her divine essence had taken shape. So this time, as she was thinking, she heard Yoon Ji-feng speak, his voice hoarse and low. He said, "Let's take a rest." Song Nansure was unusually shy and responded softly with an okay. Then the 2 of them lay straight on the bed, covered with a quilt, and chatted. Song Nansure. She no longer doubts her own charm. She doubts whether Yoon Ji-feng is impotent. Song Nansure never hid her desires. She felt there was nothing wrong with a woman taking the initiative, and based on the principle that as long as she took the initiative, they would have a story. She subtly reached out and touched Yoon Ji-feng's chest like a butterfly. The muscles under my fingertips suddenly tightened. Song Nansure's heart stirred, and he was about to add fuel to the fire when his fingertips were suddenly grabbed. The next moment, she heard Yoon Ji-feng's hoarse voice. He paused. Then he said, "How about we go to the storeroom and see what the gods of the celestial realm have sent?" Song Nansher. She withdrew her hand expressionlessly. "Oh." But I still went to see it, because Song Nansher was also a little curious. She thought pessimistically that Yoon Ji-fan probably wouldn't make it tonight. The night was long, and she had to find something to cheer herself up. For example, look at the gifts others have given you. Their storeroom was behind the new house. The two men got up and went into the storeroom through the back door. Then they went straight to the gifts from the gods. Someone had prepared a gift list for them, and Song Nansher picked it up to look at it. Then his expression became indescribable. She blurted out, "The dew from the sky personally collected by immortal Lord Beicheng. Is this a bottle of northwest wind? The nectar picked by fairy peony. Well, at least this is drinkable. The rare stone personally selected and excavated by the god of wealth. Oh no, the god of wealth's gift doesn't even contain a single spirit stone. This immortal realm seems rather stingy. Let me see who gave me this Taihu stone." Southern time. She was engrossed in watching when Yoon Ji-fan suddenly called her from behind. Song Nansher subconsciously turned his head. The kiss, fierce and intense, overwhelmed her instantly, filled with a deep longing. Song Nansher bumped into something and involuntarily stumbled backward until her waist hit a table, which then pinned her against it. She struggled to break free from the intense kiss and gasped for breath. Then she suddenly rose up, and Yoon Ji-fan picked her up and placed her on the table. He stared intently at her, his eyes swirling with desire. The next moment, Song Nansher suddenly burst out laughing. She slowly raised her foot and stepped on his leg, her eyes full of provocation. She deliberately said, "Weren't you just a gentleman, taking me to see the storeroom on our wedding night?" Yoon Ji-fan's chest heaved violently, and he said in a low, hoarse voice, "Because I just felt that your divine core has just been formed, and dual cultivation at this time could easily affect your divine core." Song Nansher moved his toes slightly. "So what's wrong with you now?" Yoon Ji-fan chuckled softly. He said, "Then I realized that I had overestimated my self-control and my rationality." Song Nansher, "So? What are you going to do?" Yoon Ji-fan immediately moved closer, showing her with his actions what he was going to do. Song Nansher was suddenly like a small boat on a stormy sea, rising and falling with the waves. From the warehouse to the bed, and then to the hot spring bath. The storm raged all night without ceasing. As dawn broke, Song Nansher struggled out of the storm and realized two truths. Don't mess with older men. Also, Yoon Ji-fan's physique is really quite good. Extra slow. Yoon Ji-fan is not only physically fit, but also has excellent learning abilities. Even Song Nan suspected that he had secretly attended some kind of intensive course. It wasn't until late at night that Yoon Ji-fan went into the hot spring bath for the third time to prepare hot water for her. Song Nansher was lying on the bed, so sleepy that she could barely keep her eyes open. She casually reached out and touched a hidden compartment. She opened it and took out a book. Song Nansher didn't look carefully at what kind of book it was, and just casually flipped through it. Then she saw the lifelike and strangely posed couple in the book. Song Nansher. She stared blankly, wondering if this was really a pose a human body could make. A large hand suddenly appeared from behind her and snatched the book from her hand. Song Nansher was startled. She turned her head and saw Yoon Ji-fan, who was wearing only a thin coat, holding a book in one hand and looking thoughtfully at the page she had opened. Then he looked at Song Nansher and asked, "You like this kind?" Song Nansher. "Oh no, her back is going to break." Then came the long, dark night. Despite being in good health and having good learning abilities, the result was that the next day, Song Nansure got out of bed looking like he had kidney deficiency. Yoon Ji-fan woke up early, looking refreshed, and was watching her from the side. When he saw Song Nansure get up, he immediately reached out to help her. Song Nansure kept a straight face, slapped his hand away with a smack, and said dryly, "No need, I can get up by myself." Yoon Ji-fan hesitated, then said, "But, didn't you say last night?" Song Nansure quickly interrupted him, saying vaguely, "You've already applied the medicine to me." Yoon Ji-fan, "Then your waist." Song Nansure gritted his teeth, "I can hold on." She struggled to her feet, her back aching and sore. However, once her feet touched the ground, she realized that it wasn't just a problem with her back. Her legs were sore and weak, and she almost collapsed when she landed. Yoon Ji-fan helped her stand up. "My groin still aches slightly. I don't know if it's from the bite he gave me last night or something else." With a sore back and aching legs, she felt uncomfortable all over. Yoon Ji-fan helped her sit on a stool to the side, and the culprit immediately handed her a cup of hot tea. Song Nansure reluctantly took a sip. The temperature was just right, and it had a slight sweetness, just the right amount of sweetness. She reluctantly offered a couple of compliments. "What's in here?" "It's not bad." His voice was somewhat hoarse. Yoon Ji-fan honestly replied, "It's honey. I gave it to soothe your throat yesterday." Song Nansure looked up, staring at him with dead fish eyes. Yoon Ji-fan realized the danger and immediately shut his mouth. Like a salted fish whose life force has been drained, Song Nansure sighed to the sky and said listlessly, "Yoon Ji-fan, I think I still prefer your upright and unmoved demeanor." Yoon Ji-fan couldn't help but laugh. He leaned down and kissed Song Nansure's nose, whispering, "But I really liked how you looked last night." Then, Song Nansure woke up an hour later. After Song Nansure finished tidying up, the two of them went from the bedroom to the front hall. Jiangji and the others, who had been waiting in the front hall since early morning, were already squatting on the ground counting ants. Seeing them approaching together, Jiangji's eyes lit up, and he raised his hand to greet them. Then he had a meal. The reason is simple: the contrast between Song Nansure and Yoon Ji-fan is too stark. One looks like it's been guzzled with a bottle of beauty elixir, while the other looks like it's been kept awake for 3 whole days. He was completely bewildered, then couldn't help but ask, "What? Did you guys fight last night?" Song Nansure, "You said it's okay if they fight." Song Nansure was speechless. Yu Xiu pulled Jiangji aside and whispered, "Don't talk nonsense." She glanced at Song Nansure and Yoon Ji-fan, both of whom had seen a surge in cultivation, and couldn't help but think that their dual cultivation was indeed very effective. If it's just about reading faces. Looking at Song Nansure's listless face, Yu Xiu really wanted to ask them if they had turned dual cultivation into some kind of yin-yang replenishment technique. But it's okay, the answer is that I bumped into it. Yu Xiu was completely satisfied. The two were each preoccupied with their own thoughts, while Yu Jiujiu, standing to the side, remained completely clueless. She couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Yu Xiu pulled her junior sister aside and said dismissively, "This is not something a child should know." Seeing that her senior sister didn't want to talk, Yu Jiujiu couldn't help but glance at the black rabbit on her shoulder. She thought, "Why don't I ask Qu Xuan when I get back?" Seeing the expressions on the 3 people's faces, Song Nansure couldn't help but ask, "What are you all doing here so early in the morning?" Jiangji reminded him, "It's already noon." Song Nansure. She took a deep breath, Then what are you doing here in the middle of the day? Jiangji then said, Firstly, I came to see you all. Just as Song Nanshe was about to ask what was so interesting about them, Jiangji continued, Secondly, he suddenly reached out and pulled out a bird with blue wings from somewhere. Song Nanshe didn't pay much attention at first glance, but upon second glance, Bluebird. Her voice rose an octave. The bluebird they had just seen yesterday had shrunk to dozens of times its original size and lay listlessly in Jiangji's palm. It heard Song Nanshe's voice and responded weakly. Jiangji, who was standing nearby, said, I found it in the back mountain. I thought I'd bring it to you. Song Nanshe, so you waited until now to say it? Jiangji poked the bluebird's body somewhat guiltily and said, It's okay, it's not dead. The bluebird was momentarily stunned by the poking, and Song Nanshe quickly asked, What happened to you? The bluebird said weakly, On the way back, the bluebird encountered an advancement tribulation and exhausted its power in order to resist it. Jiangji whispered, When I found it in the back mountain, the Yi Qinzhou brothers, who came to your wedding yesterday, were also there. They didn't recognize the bluebird and almost roasted and ate it. Song Nanshe looked at the bird with pity, feeling that it was too pitiful, and even used the Qian hexagram. The bluebird visibly regained its vitality. Song Nanshe then asked, Can you go back now? The bluebird said somewhat embarrassedly, Not yet. The bluebird still needs to recover its spiritual power. Song Nanshe, seeing things through to the end, immediately said, All right then. How will you restore your spiritual power? I'll help you. The bluebird was overjoyed and immediately said, The bluebird is a divine beast. If I want to restore my spiritual power, I only need to eat some spirit stones. Thank you for your help, sir. Song Nanshe. Oh no, I spoke too soon. She couldn't help but glance at Qishun. By the way, do all your mythical beasts grow up eating spirit stones? She looked at the bluebird again, and the bluebird was looking at her eagerly. After a long silence, Song Nanshe calmly asked, Then can you eat the radish? I still have some radishes here. Bluebird. It couldn't help but say, My lord, if our Azure Bird clan does not return to the immortal realm on time, we will gradually lose our spiritual power while staying in the mortal world. Song Nanshe hesitated for a moment. She felt that since the person had come to give her a wedding gift, she couldn't let them end up like this. She glanced at Yung Jifeng. Yung Jifeng immediately understood and nodded to her. Seeing this, Song Nanshe turned to Qingyu and said, All right, I'll help you. The bluebird was overjoyed. Then Song Nanshe immediately took out a pile of spirit stones. Seeing this, Qingyu couldn't help but admire the generosity of the two gentlemen. For some reason, both of them stared intently at it while it was eating. After it had almost finished eating, it burped and seemed to want to thank Song Nanshe. Then Song Nanshe glanced at Yung Jifeng and asked, Did you write it down? Yung Jifeng nodded, I've remembered it all. The bluebird ate 320 spirit stones. Song Nanshe immediately took the list from Yung Jifeng's hand and placed it under the bewildered bluebird's claws. Then he said gently, Look, this is the IOU for the spirit stones you ate. This is the bill for the expenses we've incurred over the past 20 years in repairing the Myriad Manifestations Tower. When you go back, take all of this with you and give it to Senior Shi. Tell him to prepare the spirit stones. When we ascend, we'll have to ask him to reimburse us for all of this. An IOU and a bill were placed in front of the bluebird. Bluebird. It's too early to say that we should be generous. It couldn't help but ask, An IOU? Song Nanshe, You can also think of it as a delivery fee from the celestial realm to the mortal world, except that the fee is payable upon delivery. We will pay for it first, and when you go back, you can tell Senior Sure to pay us back for the delivery fee. Bluebird. It couldn't help but look at the couple. The couple looked completely self-righteous, showing no embarrassment whatsoever. Song Nansure added with a smile, "Of course, if you don't help deliver it, you'll have to pay for the delivery fee." The Bluebird immediately replied, "The Bluebird will not fail in its mission." So, an hour later, the Bluebird returned to the celestial realm in a daze, carrying 2 bills. When it returned, a group of waiting gods immediately received the news that the Bluebird had been surrounded as soon as it entered the immortal realm. The gods began asking questions all at once. How was the wedding between the god of law enforcement and the demon god? Did you stay to attend? Otherwise, why are you back so late? Do the god of law enforcement and the demon god like the congratulatory gift we sent? Are the 2 righteous gods easy to get along with? Is the demon god very ferocious? The Bluebird stood blankly in the middle, and after a long while, it stammered out, "It's very complicated." The gods were displeased. Yes is yes, no is no. It's complicated, so what kind of answer is that? The Bluebird had untold sorrows in its heart. It's implying that the 2 gods probably don't like your gift, because they seem to prefer money. It also wants to say that while they are easy to get along with, they are stingy. But it dared not speak ill of them. What is bad talk? It's repeating what they did. The Bluebird gave a weary smile. Until someone asked expectantly, "Did those 2 righteous gods ask you to bring us anything?" The Bluebird shuddered, finally remembering its mission. It immediately scanned the crowd, and finally, its gaze fell on Senior Stone, who was watching the excitement from the sidelines. It immediately replied, "The 2 righteous gods asked me to bring back some things, but only for Lord Sure." Senior Sure was taken aback for a moment, then his eyes lit up. The gods immediately looked over with envy. Facing their envious gazes, Senior Sure smiled smugly while humbly saying, I'm sorry. I have a debt of gratitude to that child for passing on his legacy. I suppose that child also remembers me, which is why he was thinking of me on his wedding day. Ha ha ha." He walked over with a smug look on his face, while the Bluebird looked at him with pity. He wondered, what did they bring me? "I brought 2 bills. But Chinyo felt that she should still give Lord Sure some face. So it said, let's go back to Lord Sure's residence and I'll give it to him then." Senior Sure immediately said with a smug look, "This must be a token of my respect. Then I, Sure, will not keep you company any longer. Ha ha ha." Everyone watched with envy as he and the Bluebird gradually disappeared into the distance. The Heavenly Emperor, who was in the Heavenly Palace, also heard this scene reported by his subordinates. He couldn't help but close his eyes. One is a god of law enforcement, one is a demon god, and another is a star god who controls the astrolabe and prophesies. 2 of them are a married couple, and the other one has such a good relationship with them. Each of these 3 gods is a force to be reckoned with. If they were to form an ironclad alliance, would anyone in the celestial realm still be able to see the Heavenly Emperor? Especially the god of law enforcement. The power to enforce the law, adjudicate, and punish. These powers were not previously held by any divine office. They were all in his possession. Now, he couldn't help but ask, is their relationship really that good? No sooner had he finished speaking than a subordinate rushed in and said urgently, Your Majesty, something has happened. The Heavenly Emperor remained calm. What is it? Could it be that they've fallen out? The subordinate's voice was full of gossip. Just now, Lord Sure kicked Qingyu out. And in front of all the gods, he declared that he and the enforcement god and the demon god are sworn enemies. Now everyone says that they've fallen out. Heavenly Emperor. Happiness came too suddenly. What? Is heaven finally starting to favor him? The Heavenly Emperor was inexplicably flattered. Song Nanshe was unaware of what was happening in the immortal realm, nor did she know that Senior Shi was determined to be her mortal enemy. After the wedding, seeing that the Wanxiang Pagoda had been repaired and she no longer needed to stay and guard against the evil spirits, she and Yung Jifeng packed their things and set off to travel the world. Zhu Xiu was very envious of the two people's decision, but her crematorium business was booming and she even had some ideas about entering the real estate industry in the cultivation world, so she had to give up the idea with regret. Jiangji then began searching for a way to give old man Lu a physical form. In his quest to find a reliable secret technique from the cultivation world, he sought out fights throughout the cultivation community, winning over many followers and incurring a lot of hatred. Yu Jiujiu, on the other hand, was noticed by a body cultivation sect because of her outstanding talent in body cultivation, and was invited to do academic exchanges. Although the junior sister was socially awkward, she cherished this opportunity to exchange ideas and improve with her peers, so she gritted her teeth and went. Seeing this, Qi Shun, being very love-struck, skipped the trial opportunity his father had prepared for him and happily followed along. Enraged, the demon emperor wrote a letter to Song Nanshe cursing his unjustly conceived son and vowing to raise a new crown prince. Song Nanshe put away the letter, sat on the donkey's back and shook his head, saying, "The demon emperor has been saying this for over 20 years, but he hasn't replaced Qi Shun yet." Yung Jifeng, who was standing to the side, looked at her and suddenly asked, "Does your back still hurt?" Song Nanshe stiffened involuntarily, then looked at him expressionlessly and said, "How dare you ask?" Yung Jifeng apologized readily. "I was wrong." Song Nanshe, sitting on the donkey, waved his hand and said, "Accompany me for a while, and I'll forgive you." A hint of a smile appeared in Yung Jifeng's eyes as he replied, "Yes, sir." Brother Donkey shook his head and snorted, clearly displeased with the two's mushy behavior. Song Nanshe and Yung Jifeng had been away for almost 20 years before returning. When Zhu Xiu and the others came to pick her up, Zhu Xiu looked at Song Nan with envy and said, "Junior sister's cultivation has improved a lot again." Song Nanshe gave a forced smile, reluctant to mention how he had improved his cultivation along the way. "I couldn't help but touch my slightly sore lower back." Jiangji asked, "Why did you come back this time?" Song Nanshe glanced at Yung Jifeng. Then Yung Jifeng said in a deep voice, "I feel like I'm about to ascend to immortality. I'll return to seclusion." The group was taken aback for a moment, then couldn't help but ask, "Are you in seclusion preparing for ascension?" Yung Jifeng shook his head and said, "No, we will suppress our cultivation in seclusion and wait for Nanshe." Jiangji was taken aback, and said with a mix of emotion and envy, "You guys are really..." But it didn't say what it really was. Yung Jifeng went into seclusion to suppress his cultivation, while Master Shi, after overcoming his inner demons, made rapid progress in his cultivation and ascended to immortality ahead of them. On the day he ascended to heaven, his white hair turned black, and he no longer looked old and frail. He couldn't help but burst into laughter, and said with great pride, "I'll go to the immortal realm first to earn a divine position, and then wait for you all to come up." Song Nanshe looked up at the sky and remained silent for a long time. 15 years later, Song Nanshe suddenly felt as if he was about to ascend to heaven. At that time, Yoon Ji-feng's cultivation was almost out of control. The two of them then faced their tribulation together. Ascending to godhood before the age of 100 is extremely rare in the entire cultivation world, not to mention that these two ascensionists have already reserved two godhoods. On the day they ascended to immortality, almost half of the cultivation world came to witness the ceremony, and the gods in the immortal realm who had been waiting for their ascension also gathered together to watch the spectacle. The tribulation lightning that sent them to ascend was unprecedented in its grandeur. Even the most knowledgeable gods in the celestial realm had never witnessed such a spectacle. Song Nansure walked through the heavenly tribulation amidst such lightning, and together with Yoon Ji-feng, they stepped into the immortal realm in the golden light of ascension. At this moment, Senior Shore was still watching the excitement from the crowd. Song Nansure greeted him happily on the spot and asked warmly, "Senior, have you prepared your spirit stones?" Without saying a word, Senior Shore turned and ran. So, on the day they ascended to heaven, half of the celestial realm knew that the two new gods had a financial dispute with the star god. Extra 5. On the day Song Nansure ascended to heaven, he got into a dispute with Senior Shore over economic matters, which led him to the Heavenly Emperor. The Heavenly Emperor, who had been on high alert since early morning, was dumbfounded because two powerful gods had ascended to heaven. Watching the two people earnestly arguing over the bill in front of him, he suddenly wondered what his worries of the past few decades had been for. Who would believe that these money-grubbing individuals would form an alliance to threaten his position? The Heavenly Emperor felt a mixture of secret delight and embarrassment. In short, his feelings were extremely complicated. But he felt that their love of money meant they had desires. And those with desires are always more reassuring than those without. As an agent of the way of heaven, yet without desires or wants, does he face his subordinates or the way of heaven? Seeing that the two of them were already arguing in front of him about whether Song Nansure sent a bill to the star god or not, all the way up to whether Senior Shore left an IOU for Song Nansure before his ascension or not, and that they were going to continue arguing, the Heavenly Emperor quickly interrupted them. The Heavenly Emperor said, "I understand the meaning of the two righteous gods. Since you are both masters of the myriad manifestations tower, then Star God, why don't you?" Before he could finish speaking, Senior Shore immediately declared confidently, "I'm poor." The Heavenly Emperor was caught off guard before he could finish his sentence, his expression a complex mix of emotions. He had long heard that the Star God was poor, but he thought, how poor could a righteous god be? He never expected this. He looked at Song Nan with a complicated expression and asked the new god, "What about the god of law enforcement?" Song Nansure smiled and said modestly, "I am no less capable." Heavenly Emperor. He suddenly had some doubts. Was the standard by which heaven selected its agents simply based on who was poor? Was he not chosen by heaven before his ascension simply because he wasn't poor enough? The Heavenly Emperor felt a mix of emotions, but when he looked down, he saw that the two people who had been at each other's throats were now looking at him thoughtfully. The Heavenly Emperor's heart tightened, thinking he had said something wrong. He calmly asked, "Do the two righteous gods have anything else to say?" The two exchanged a glance. Then, the Heavenly Emperor heard Senior Stone say, with a faint expression, "It's nothing. I'm just lamenting that I'm not as wealthy as the Heavenly Emperor. If I had some wealth, I wouldn't be making a scene in front of the Heavenly Emperor and putting him in such a difficult position." Song Nansure immediately put on a hypocritical expression and said, it's true, I'm just not good enough." Heavenly Emperor. Okay, he's wrong. These two were definitely up to no good. They'd been plotting against him for a long time. He couldn't help but look at Yoon Ji-feng, who remained silent, hoping he could stop their absurd behavior. He then asked, "What does the demon god think?" When he asked that question, he thought, a demon god, as a divine position that has never appeared in the cultivation world before, must also have some idle baggage. Then Yoon Ji-fan calmly said, "I will listen to my wife." Heavenly Emperor. Damn it, he's a sissy and a love-struck fool. The three of them stared intently at him, causing the Heavenly Emperor's mind to race. Originally, he had no obligation to pay for their bills and could have easily let the matter slide. But since they have desires, hopes, and wants, and what they want is something he can give them. The Heavenly Emperor smiled and said, "It is no easy task for the God of Law Enforcement to resist evil spirits in the mortal realm. I naturally cannot let the God of Law Enforcement pay for the changes in the entire mortal realm. Therefore, this money should be paid by me." Song Nanshi's smile widened even more, and he said with a beaming smile, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The Heavenly Emperor spent a large sum of money, but inexplicably, he felt that it was worth it. Since he wanted to be a good person to the end, he smiled and said, "The God of Law Enforcement and the God of Demons have just arrived in the immortal realm and probably do not yet have a place to stay. As the host, I will shamelessly arrange it for you. What do you two think?" Song Nanshe laughed heartily. "How could I possibly accept this?" The Heavenly Emperor laughed and said, "This is what I should do." The Heavenly Emperor thoughtfully added, "If your residences were assigned according to your official positions, they wouldn't be able to be next to each other. But since you are husband and wife, I will show you mercy and arrange for your residences to be adjacent to each other." Song Nanshe was very embarrassed. "Your Majesty, I'm really troubling you." The Heavenly Emperor, "You're too kind." The two exchanged polite greetings, and for a time, the entire Heavenly Emperor's palace was filled with joy and harmony, with both host and guest enjoying themselves. When Song Nanshe left, he was still a little reluctant to leave. The Heavenly Emperor personally saw them off, his face full of smiles. This left the god, who had been pretending to be passing by to witness their tense standoff, dumbfounded. I heard decades ago that the Heavenly Emperor was somewhat wary of the two gods who had not yet ascended to heaven. Is that what you call being wary? Song Nanshe and his companions ignored the subtle stares around them, their smiles unchanged. Only when they reached a secluded spot did Song Nanshe rub his face and say, "Senior Sure, you went to all this trouble to argue your way to the Heavenly Emperor just to ask him for money. Senior Sure, just tell me if you want this money or not." Song Nanshe answered without hesitation, "Yes. After all, it's been a long time since I've seen such a generous sucker." Senior Sure's expression softened. Then Song Nanshe suddenly asked, "What's going on with the Heavenly Emperor?" Senior Sure waved his hand dismissively and said, "He's just a bit too suspicious, but don't worry about it." Upon hearing this, Song Nanshe couldn't help but feel worried, and even began to imagine his future life filled with sword fights and bloodshed. Senior Sure chuckled at her expression and said directly, "Our Heavenly Emperor is quite diligent and hardworking. He's just a bit suspicious, but he values his reputation. If he can't find concrete evidence of what you've done, he can only harbor suspicions in his heart for the sake of his reputation. In short, he's quite suitable to be the Heavenly Emperor." He said meaningfully, "When dealing with him, you have to be careful about how you conduct yourself." Song Nanshe seemed to be deep in thought. What does senior mean? Senior Sure remained unfazed. For example, you can find an excuse to ask him for money every now and then. This will make him feel that you have a weakness, which will make him feel more secure. Song Nanshe. This was the first time she had ever seen such a unique request, and she was deeply shocked. This isn't just being suspicious. This is a bodhisattva. You want weaknesses, right? Only he's willing to give her those weaknesses. She can be weak from head to toe. She can give the Heavenly Emperor a strong sense of security. Song Nanshe suddenly began to look forward to his life after becoming a god. She couldn't help but sigh. The Heavenly Emperor is truly a good boss. Senior Shi coughed as he looked at her expression and said, "That's enough, don't go too far." Song Nanshe smiled and said, I understand. Senior Shi felt that she probably didn't understand. He became inexplicably worried. Amidst Senior Shi's worries, Song Nanshe and Yoon Jifeng specially selected 2 residences near the God of Wealth, one on the left and one on the right, tightly surrounding the God of Wealth. When the God of Wealth received this news, he was so anxious that he couldn't sleep well for 3 days. The subordinates sent by the Heavenly Emperor to inquire about their opinions on the residents left with complicated expressions. 2 days later, Song Nanshe's residence was approved, and Song Nanshe, who had been out having fun for 2 days, quickly moved. After moving, she discovered that old Master Shi actually lived right across from the God of Wealth. He's so young now that Song Nanshe doesn't recognize him. The old man laughed as soon as he saw them, saying, "I knew you would live here after you ascended to immortality." Sure enough. So now, instead of Song Nanshe and his wife surrounding the God of Wealth, it became Song Nanshe, his wife, and their relatives surrounding the God of Wealth. The God of Wealth was anxious for 2 whole days, constantly pondering what the big shots had in mind about him. Song Nanshe was completely unaware of the hardships the God of Wealth was going through. The mansion was already prepared, and after half a month, she started working there. Yes, even after she ascended to heaven, she still has to go to work. Because she is a true god, with divine authority, and that authority is to enforce the law, judge, and punish. Once you've been given a priesthood, you have to work. Just as the God of Wealth's duty is to balance the fortunes of various small worlds, Song Nanshe's divine duty is to judge and punish gods who have made mistakes. From the moment her divinity was formed, this was her duty. Many years ago, Heaven gave her a pair of eyes that could distinguish truth from falsehood, but at that time she did not understand what Heaven meant. But now she thinks that Heaven probably wanted her to take over the divine office of the God of Law Enforcement back then. Because the moment the divine essence was formed, Song Nanshe discovered that his eyes had become truly capable of distinguishing truth from falsehood. She can see the cause and effect of a god, and any lie cannot hide from her. After mastering the 8 hexagrams, she became a legendary diviner who could determine life and death with a single word, and the so-called punishment was only a matter of a single sentence from her. To be honest, this kind of power is very alluring. But Song Nanshe didn't even have the chance to become obsessed. Because this job seemed to be somewhat different from what she had imagined. She imagined law enforcement to be a combination of the police force and the courts, fighting crime and upholding justice. The deity in practice mediates disputes among the gods' neighbors, presides over economic disputes among the gods, finds the gods' lost amounts, and incidentally, can also preside over 1 or 2 divorce cases. In his first year, Song Nanshe handled 10 divorce cases, adjudicated over 30 cases of fighting and brawling, and incidentally collected debts from several people. She wants to resign. Yoon Jifeng is a bit better off than her. He is currently responsible for guarding against the evil spirits formed from the evil energy of the 3,000 minor worlds below the Northern Abyss. When he is bored, he can go down to the Northern Abyss and fight the evil spirits. But when Song Nanshe got bored, he could only play the game of Dan Yun Xifeng, a game involving playing the game of Dan Yun Xifeng. The second year, the third year. By the fifth year, she had settled down and become very laid back. When she was bored, she would invite her neighbors to play a game of mahjong. If they were short one player, she could invite the god of wealth to join in and share in his good fortune. The god of wealth, trembling with fear, was called to play mahjong among a group of big shots. He's numb. Ever since these people became his neighbors, he hasn't slept well. In the seventh year, Song Nansure received a special case. The fairy maiden in charge of guiding ascension found her and said indignantly, "High goddess, a newly ascended cultivator got into a fight while queuing to register. When your subordinates tried to arrest him, he actually claimed to know you and wanted to arrest you." Upon hearing this, Song Nansure became excited and immediately said, "Bring it over here quickly so I can see it." Then, the fairy maiden then grabbed Jiangji, who was dressed in rags. A fat cat was perched on his shoulder, and he was muttering curses in the voice of Old Man Lu, with his hands on his hips. Song Nansure. Jiangji. Song Nansure remained expressionless, while Jiangji lowered his head in shame. She calmly said, "Senior brother, have you gone from being a proud and arrogant maniac to a lawless madman?" Jiangji. He said with shame, "I can't explain. Actually, it's quite simple to explain." Before ascending to immortality, Jiangji found a way to give Old Man Lu a physical body. However, since he couldn't actually swap souls with a living person, nor could he prepare an external avatar like Shengbi, the physical body he prepared for Old Man Lu was a skeleton of a divine beast that looked like a cat, obtained from a secret realm. Old Man Lu successfully possessed the body, and the skeleton transformed into a kitten. A few years later, the kitten grew into a big fat cat. One day, while Big Fat Cat and Jiangji were traveling, they stole a cultivator's wine and were caught by the cultivator, who was about to send them to be sterilized. Upon discovering this, Jiangji was terrified and immediately snatched the fat cat, saving Old Man Lu. But the cultivator also had a fiery temper, and before Jiangji could explain, the two started fighting. Then they fought their way to the desolate wilderness, getting further and further as they went off course. In the end, although the explanation was cleared up, the two of them were so engrossed in fighting that they felt the other was a rare opponent and didn't stop. Then they fought until their clothes were tattered, until they both broke through and ascended to immortality. The two of them ascended to the immortal realm in a daze. Still half asleep, they prepared to queue for registration. Old Man Lu mocked the cultivator again, who then grabbed Old Man Lu, determined to have him neutered. Jiangji snatched the cat. It immediately descended into complete chaos. After listening, Song Nansure held his forehead and remained silent for a long time. Finally, she said with mixed feelings, "It's pretty good, quite creative." Then, without any mercy, she punished the two people and one cat who had just ascended to immortality by making them undergo half a month of labor reform. Jiangji had no objections. After his labor reform, he happily bought a piece of land around the God of Wealth, intending to continue being neighbors with his junior sister. God of Wealth. The pressure is increased. Yung Jifeng also felt a lot of pressure, because now, before he could do anything, he had to make sure that no one would come knocking on the door to ask Song Nansure to play mahjong. Jiangji, however, showed no restraint. He even went so far as to buy 2 more plots of land, saying that he intended to use them after his 2 junior sisters ascended to immortality. He single-handedly drove up the surrounding property prices. God of Wealth. The pressure keeps piling up. Just as the God of Wealth's hair was becoming increasingly thin, Song Nanshure's faction directly gave him an Ascension family bucket. Zhu Xiu, along with his junior sister and her family, accidentally entered a secret realm while searching for their missing senior brother. They stayed in the secret realm for decades and then ascended to immortality together. The 2 plots of land that Jiangji bought immediately came in handy. So the group surrounded the God of Wealth's residence, using it as the center. The God of Wealth, trapped in the encirclement. He wants to move. He really wants to move. Qu Shuang also moved into the mansion with his junior sister. At this time, the Demon Emperor, who had already ascended to heaven and was vying with a group of demon gods in the immortal realm for the position of Demon God Lord, was completely unaware of this. He was completely focused on his career, and he fought fiercely in the battlefield. After he had almost eliminated all his rivals and felt he needed help, he realized something was wrong when he calculated the time and found that his son, who should have ascended to heaven long ago, had not yet come to find him. After thinking for a moment, he found the divine palace of law enforcement. As soon as the door opened, they saw Song Nanshe and several others, along with the God of Wealth and Old Master Shu, making up 2 mahjong tables. Her son was sitting at the mahjong table feeding Yu Jiujiu tiles. Demon Emperor. His son didn't even see him. It was Yun Jifeng who saw him first and called out, Song Nanshe. Song Nanshe turned his head and immediately said enthusiastically, a rare guest, Demon Emperor. Shall we play a game? The Demon Emperor remained silent for a moment, then calmly said, I'm sorry, I've come at the wrong time. Extra 6. Song Nanshe had just woken up when he found himself being choked by Yun Jifeng, the man in front of him with a cold and ruthless expression. Song Nanshe's first reaction was, wow, they're really going wild. She blurted out, what, is it role-playing today? For a moment, Yun Jifeng looked completely bewildered. Then his face immediately turned cold and expressionless. Why are you in my room? The word deceit brought Song Nanshe back to his senses. Although Yun Jifeng is a demon god, he rarely refers to himself as this one. This is probably because when he was immersed in memories of his past life, he referred to himself as this one in front of Song Nanshe, and was then slapped awake by Song Nanshe. He claimed that he only had 2 states, when he was angry, and when he was facing someone with ill intentions. But perhaps due to the psychological trauma of that slap, he never referred to himself as this seat when facing Song Nanshe. So, is he preparing to roleplay as the Cloud Demon today, or? Suddenly, Song Nanshe broke free from Yun Jifeng's restraints and took the initiative, grabbing his neck and pressing him onto the stone table. A moment of surprise flashed across the face of the person in front of him, but it quickly turned cold, as if he were not the one being restrained at that moment. The things on the table fell to the floor with a clatter. The 2 of them acted as if they hadn't heard anything and just stood there facing each other. But the commotion quickly attracted the attention of those outside the door, and someone immediately rushed in with a sword, urgently saying, Lord Demon Lord, what's going on? They suddenly pushed open the door. Then it immediately went silent. The Demon Lord they were talking about was being pressed down on a stone table in a strange posture by a woman with disheveled hair and wearing a middle-aged robe. The scene was extremely exciting. Ah, this. The subordinates looked at each other, unsure whether they should go in or not. Song Nanshe glanced at them, then looked at Yun Jifeng without changing his expression. Yun Jifeng said expressionlessly, Get out. The subordinate, regaining his senses, immediately and respectfully withdrew without daring to raise any objections. They even thoughtfully closed the door for them. Yun Jifeng. Song Nanshe. She looked at the person in front of her with amusement and said, Demon Lord. Yun Jifeng only asked, Why are you in my room? Song Nansure did not answer, but only said, I recognize you. Yoon Jifeng sneered, Is there anyone in the cultivation world who doesn't recognize me? Song Nansure slowly released his grip on him, seemingly unafraid that he might harm him. Then, he casually made a spell, and a red dress appeared over his inner garment. She said, But the one I recognize is not the one in front of me. Yoon Jifeng looked up. Song Nansure smiled, looked at him steadily, and said, Hello, Yoon Jifeng. Hello, Cloud Demon. A quarter of an hour later, Song Nansure succinctly explained the relationship between the world he was in and the world he was in. The other party, well, I don't know if they believe me or not. Yoon Jifeng remained unmoved, listening to Song Nansure talk about such outrageous things as if he were talking about eating cabbage today, his indifference making Song Nansure feel somewhat uncomfortable. Song Nansure decided to give him some time and idly looked around the room in front of him. She knew Yoon Jifeng, who didn't care about food or lodging, but Song Nansure herself liked to enjoy herself when conditions allowed, so Yoon Jifeng followed her and stayed in comfortable beds with soft pillows. But the stone table, stone bed, and stone benches in the room in front of him were so cold and hard that Song Nansure felt uncomfortable just looking at them. Song Nansure was pondering whether to advise the person to move to a different place to avoid developing arthritis in old age when Yoon Jifeng suddenly asked, What is your relationship with him? Song Nansure certainly knew who he was. But this relationship, well, how should I put it? Song Nansure paused for a moment, then calmly said, He got out of my bed this morning. Yoon Jifeng. The Cloud Demon was stunned. Yoon Jifeng and Song Nansure each occupied a corner of the room, remaining silent to each other. Yoon Jifeng scrutinized the woman, who was supposedly from another world. He didn't know her. He had never seen her in his entire life from birth to the present. But she can easily reverse the situation when she has her own weakness under her control. Her strength surpasses his, and far surpasses his. So, is she the god she spoke of, from another world, who has already ascended to heaven, or? Yoon Jifeng couldn't help but press his temples. Something dangerous resides in his mind. Today, he had been trying to seal that thing into his own sea of consciousness, which was why he locked himself in his room and ordered someone to guard him. He knew he might not succeed completely, but as long as he could seal that thing for a moment, he would have time to fight for control of his own consciousness. Even if that thing eventually broke free, his control over his consciousness weakened somewhat. He succeeded, but at the same time, the woman suddenly appeared in front of him. Yoon Jifeng knew that the thing had several incarnations outside working for him. He didn't know if what the woman said was true, or if she was also an incarnation sent by the thing to deceive him. He glanced indifferently at the person in front of him, his gaze inadvertently sweeping over the red marks on the other person's neck. Yoon Jifeng. He moved away expressionlessly. Song Nansure scratched his neck as if he had something in mind, but still couldn't find anything wrong. Until Yoon Jifeng suddenly asked, What did you mean by role-playing just now? Song Nansure. She said expressionlessly, It means exactly what you think, so what? Grandpa's. Yoon Jifeng felt that he was very bad, extremely bad. For example, he fell asleep holding Nansure last night, but was startled awake this morning and saw Jiangji's terrified face. For example, Jiangji drew his sword without saying a word and rushed towards him, shouting exterminate the demons and defend the righteous path. Yoon Jifeng. He couldn't help but ask, Jiangji, do you have some kind of serious illness? Jiangji's face was filled with fervor. A scholar can be killed but not humiliated. You surnamed Yoon. Don't underestimate my youth. Yoon Ji-feng. This familiar recipe, this familiar taste. He was so familiar with him that Yoon Ji-feng wanted to beat him up without hesitation. So he did just that. But as the fight went on, Yoon Ji-feng gradually realized something was wrong. For example, why did Jiang Ji's strength suddenly weaken so much? For example, why didn't Nanshe come out to eat sunflower seeds and watch the fun when they were fighting? More importantly, what about Nanshe? He immediately lost all interest in slowly wearing down his opponent and subdued him with a single sword strike. Yoon Ji-feng stared at him for a long time. Then he abruptly asked, "Who are you? Where is Song Nanshe?" Jiang Ji, standing before him, uttered two sentences that left him both bewildered and terrified. "I am Jiang Ji. Who is Song Nanshe?" Yoon Ji-feng remained silent for a long time before suddenly sheathing his sword. He simply said calmly, "Take me to find the Cloud Demon." Jiang Ji looked bewildered. "Aren't you Yoon Ma? What are you up to?" Yoon Ji-feng calmly replied, "I am not. I am Yoon Ji-feng." Half an hour later, Yoon Ji-feng finally managed to explain his origins and the relationship between the two worlds to the other party. During this time, he constantly endured the other person's interruptions and exclamations of "Is that so? And how is that possible?" causing his blood pressure to rise rapidly. He suddenly felt a bit of empathy for the cloud demons of this world. For example, he felt that Yoon Mo's constant hostility towards Jiang Ji was not necessarily entirely due to Sean Bingyi's coercion to seize the destiny of the chosen one. Is it possible that the other person is just really asking for a beating? But Jiang Ji didn't think so. After listening to Yoon Ji-feng's explanation, he was very moved and said, "I didn't expect that Yoon Ji-feng would have so many unspeakable difficulties." Yoon Ji-feng remained silent for a long time before suddenly asking, "So you believed it?" Jiang Ji exclaimed, "What else?" Yoon Ji-feng. He believed it. He believed that Yoon Ma had definitely been diligently holding back in the early stages. Then Jiang Ji said again, "You are so much stronger than me, and you don't have any demonic energy on you. You can't possibly be some powerful figure pretending to be Yoon Ji-feng to deceive a junior like me, can you? What is there about me that would make you a fool of me?" Upon hearing this, Yoon Ji-feng reluctantly thought, "Well, at least you have some brains." Jiang Ji, who had some sense, asked him with great enthusiasm, "Why are we looking for Yoon Ma? Is it to save you from another world? Or to make him repent and become a Buddha?" Yoon Ji-feng said expressionlessly, "Neither." Jiang Ji, "Then what do we do?" Yoon Ji-feng, "Looking for my wife." Jiang Ji, "And then?" Yoon Ji-feng, "Then we'll work together to figure out a way to get back." Jiang Ji, "Where's Yoon Ma?" Yoon Ji-feng, "Who cares what he does?" Jiang Ji, "Oh no, she's a hopeless romantic." He couldn't help but ask, "Who is your wife?" Yoon Ji-feng, "It's your third junior sister, Song Nanshe." Jiang Ji. He was certain that he did not have a junior sister named Song Nanshe. But for some reason, he felt that Yoon Ji-feng in front of him was so annoying. After Song Nanshe's confident "How about it?", a deathly silence fell between Song Nanshe and Yoon Ma. After a long silence, Song Nanshe calmly said, "I know what you're thinking, but we have a normal relationship as Taoist partners. We've gotten married and signed a marriage certificate." Yoon Ji-feng said expressionlessly, "I didn't think anything. You don't need to explain so much." Song Nanshe couldn't help but click his tongue. She didn't explain further and said directly, "All right, let's talk about something else then. Like, is that damn thing in your sea of consciousness still there?" Yoon Ji-feng looked over immediately, his gaze sharp as a sword. Song Nansher said matter-of-factly. Why are you looking at me like that? Yoon Ji-feng and I mean, my Yoon Ji-feng, we are Daoist partners. Isn't it normal for Daoist partners to know each other a little? Yoon Ji-feng remained silent. He didn't think it was normal. He could hardly imagine how much he had to trust someone to let her know his deepest secret. He began to feel curious about Yoon Ji-feng, and a faint sense of envy. Song Nansher couldn't help but ask, so that bastard Shenbi is still here, right? You've temporarily sealed him off. Yoon Ji-feng remained silent. Song Nansher glanced at him and said to himself, oh, that's it. She said directly, I should have told you that I am a fortune teller, and I can help you get the things out. Yoon Ji-feng remained completely unmoved. He simply said calmly, I don't believe you. Song Nansher was not saddened by his distrust at all, because she had always known that they were ultimately two different people. She had her own Yoon Ji-feng. She was only annoyed by this person's non-violent, non-cooperative attitude. But she also knew that when it came to the sea of consciousness, Yoon Ji-feng, who had now become the demon lord, would definitely be cautious. She paused, took a step back, and said, if you don't believe me, you can have Yoon Ji-feng come and help you. I mean, Yoon Ji-feng from my world. Yoon Ma immediately looked over, his expression shifting slightly. From your world? Song Nansher nodded. Yoon Ma scoffed and said, since he's here too, aren't you in a hurry to find him? Song Nansher casually sat down on the stool and said, because I'm waiting for him to come to me. The cloud demon looked over. Song Nansher smiled and said, back then, when I looked for him at the Wanxiang Pagoda, we made a promise that if we were ever separated again, he would come looking for me. Yoon Ma looked at her, his lips moving slightly. He suddenly asked, what happened when Yoon Ji-feng ended up in Xianyuan Town? Song Nan paused. Then she said, well, he probably sells furs at a stall. Cloud demon, and then? Song Nansher, then, after selling for nothing, he met me again, and I took him to the secret realm to make money. Yoon Ma scoffed and said, then he really is quite useless. Is that so? You're just as useless. The exact same voice suddenly rang out from outside the door. Song Nansher looked surprised and turned his head abruptly. The door was pushed open, and Yoon Ji-feng stood outside with Jiang Ji, followed by a group of subordinates covered in sweat. Lord, Demon Lord, we couldn't stop them. Yoon Ma said coldly, step back. Song Nansher ignored all of that and exclaimed with delight, Yoon Ji-feng. Yoon Ji-feng's expression softened, and he said softly, I've come to pick you up. The two of them couldn't help but laugh. Unlike Jiang Ji, who was used to seeing this scene, this Jiang Ji couldn't help but show an expression of toothache. Yoon Ma also turned his gaze away expressionlessly. He thought he was used to the name Yoon Ji-feng, but this was the first time he realized that Yoon Ji-feng could be someone else. He glanced again at Yoon Ji-feng, whose face was full of gentleness. Then I looked away uncomfortably. Upon seeing this, Yoon Ji-feng chuckled and said, it seems the Demon Lord has a problem with me. Yoon Ma said calmly, you have a good understanding of your own limitations. The two individuals, essentially the same person but who had just finished calling each other trash, stared at each other, simultaneously snorted coldly, and looked away. The phrase looking at each other and growing tired of each other perfectly captures the essence of the story. Song Nansher. Jiang Ji. Jiang Ji slowly opened his mouth wide. Song Nansher couldn't help but think that if Yoon Ji-feng also had an incarnation, then judging from his attitude, his incarnations should be no better than Shenbi's group of incarnations, who were constantly sabotaging each other. She stepped forward, blocking their path, and clicked her tongue, saying, "Tell me, what's your decision? Should I help you, or will Yoon Jifeng help you?" Yoon Mo was silent for a moment, then said calmly, "How do you intend to help?" Song Nansher thought for a moment. She sensed it when she was conscious, perhaps because she had been transported to a different world and returned to the mortal realm. Her current strength had been significantly reduced. It was roughly at the level she reached when she ascended. This strength is sufficient for the current situation, but helping Yoon Jifeng. They suddenly found themselves in a different world. Perhaps it was an opportunity given by the heavenly Tao, but their weakened strength was also a restriction imposed upon them by the heavenly Tao. She spoke frankly, "I can easily enter Yoon Jifeng's sea of consciousness, so I can uproot Shengbi. But I think I probably can't enter your sea of consciousness. I can only use the Qian hexagram. The Qian hexagram can completely seal him in your sea of consciousness. If you can successfully ascend in the future, you should be able to completely get him out of your sea of consciousness by taking advantage of the tribulation of ascension. However, the tribulation of your ascension will probably be more difficult." She knew clearly that these two Yoon Jifengs were one person, yet not the same person. Yoon Jifeng was able to accept her completely in his sea of consciousness. But Cloud Demon cannot. Seeing that Yoon Mo's expression remained unchanged, she continued, "Of course, you can also ask Yoon Jifeng for help. He and you are essentially the same person, sharing the same origin in your sea of consciousness. He might be able to enter your sea of consciousness." "I choose the first one." Yoon Mo suddenly interrupted her. Song Nansher looked over. Yoon Mo repeated, "I choose the first one." Yoon Jifeng showed no surprise whatsoever. The same applies to the Southern Song dynasty. Only Jiangji couldn't help but ask, "Aren't we going to nip it in the bud?" Yoon Mo then noticed that Jiangji had also arrived and couldn't help but ask, "What is his relationship with you?" While touching the new magical artifact he had crafted after leaving his destiny chart in the mortal realm, Song Nansher casually remarked, "Oh, he's my senior brother, and also Yoon Jifeng's friend and brother-in-law." Cloud Demon. Jiangji. The two of them both made faces indicating that they had a toothache. Song Nansher suddenly said, "The cloud stopped the wind." Yoon Jifeng was calling him, and Yoon Mo was very aware of this. He glanced over instinctively. Qian represents heaven. A golden light suddenly enveloped him. Within the golden light, the Cloud Demon felt a warmth that almost brought tears to its eyes. However, at the same time, perhaps because Song Nansher used his power, she suddenly felt a strong sense of rejection from the world towards them. Song Nansher's figure gradually faded away. Song Nansher looked at his hands, feeling a mix of relief and regret. Just as he was about to look up and say goodbye, he suddenly heard Yoon Mo ask, "Is your world all right?" Song Nan paused. She said earnestly, "It's very good. There are relatives and friends, but no gunpowder smoke and no war." After a long silence, Yoon Mo suddenly laughed and said, "Perhaps I would like this kind of world." Upon hearing his words, Song Nansher couldn't help but laugh. She smiled faintly and said, "Mm." The two figures gradually faded away. But at the last moment, Song Nansher suddenly took out the long sword that Zhu Xiu had replaced after ascending to immortality from his storage ring and threw it far to the east. The sword light streaked across the sky, and moments later, it appeared out of thin air in the hand of Zhu Xiu, who was being besieged by evil cultivators after her master had crippled his cultivation. Along with the long sword, her cultivation level also appeared on her. Zhu Xiu unconsciously swung his sword. As powerfully as before, he lost his cultivation. She blocked the evil cultivator's thrusting sword. Zhu Xiu stared blankly at the weapon she had left in the Wuyang sack long ago. Holding the long sword, she felt as if someone was holding her hand, and for no apparent reason, she almost burst into tears. She took a deep breath, gripped her long sword tightly, straightened her back, and looked at the evil cultivator in front of her. This time, she won't back down. On Yumo's territory, Jiangji and Yumo watched Song Nan and the other two leave, both feeling somewhat lost. Jiangji turned his head and asked Yumo with concern, "Are you all right?" Yumo looked at Jiangji, whom he had been chasing just 2 days ago, with a puzzled expression. "Are you asking me?" Jiangji laughed and said, "That's right, Song Nansher said we're friends." Cloud Demon. Who wants to be friends with an idiot? Song Nansher and Yun Jifeng opened their eyes at the same time on the bed where they had slept the night before. Song Nansher, Yun Jifeng, we. Yun Jifeng suddenly lunged at Song Nansher and bit down on his neck. Song Nansher hissed, "Don't bite. Don't bite. Are you a dog or something?" Yun Jifeng raised his head and stared intently at her, then asked in a low voice, "Do you feel sorry for Yumo, or for me?" Song Nansher was both amused and exasperated. "You're even jealous of yourself?" Yun Jifeng then bent down again. Song Nansher quickly cupped his head in her hands. "No, no, no." She paused for a moment and said softly, "Fool, if I didn't care about you, how could my will have influenced the heavenly doll and given us the chance to return to another timeline?" Yun Jifeng paused for a long time, then chuckled softly and leaned down to kiss her. Then a loud shout suddenly rang out from outside. Jiangji exclaimed excitedly, "Quick, quick, junior sister. The god of wealth is back from his business trip. Let's go find him and play mahjong." Without hesitation, Song Nansher pushed his face away, coming. Yun Jifeng. He was wrong. He wasn't the one she felt most sorry for. "It is a spirit stone,"